Here's a question from Austin Sarabia. Can Jimmy give an example, giving a distinction between not my taste and versus abuses in the liturgy? Which I think that question is leaning to the latter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just that.
So
yeah, that's a good question.
So I wrote a whole book on liturgical law and the abuse of liturgical law. The most recent edition of it is called Mass Revision. The easiest way to get it is in its Kindle edition, because I don't think it's in print and paper anymore. So I take liturgical abuse very seriously. In fact, that was the first book I wrote, was on liturgical abuses. And what a liturgical abuse is it's when you break the law. If the law says for the liturgy, do this, and you ignore that and do something else, you are committing a liturgical abuse. But there are no regulations about exactly what type of music must be used. And so I could have an opinion that I don't think this music is suitable or helpful, or I can say it's going to push people away from an authentic worship experience. But that's my opinion. That is not a violation of the law.
And you might even be right in your opinion.
The law
correct?
The law. What's that?
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just saying, and you might even be right in that opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But that doesn't,
in many cases.
and that doesn't mean that it's a violation of liturgical law. Yeah.
Correct, because, and I would say that I have been of the opinion that the law is too vague. Now, I understand on this point. I understand there are challenges in talking about music and trying to legally define what is and is not permissible. I mean, you either say, this is the only music we're going to use. Here's an official list of hymns, and that's it. Or if you but the problem with doing that, or one of the problems with doing that, is we're dependent on musicians. Historically, now today, if we wanted, the Vatican could or the USCCB could just publish a bunch of MP3s and say, play these on your sound system in church and don't do anything else.
God forbid.
Yeah, but historically, that has not been an option, because historically, if you want music in church, you need local musicians. And The problem is local musicians have different levels of talent. They know different styles. They prefer different styles. And you kind of got to work with who you've got on a local setting. And so if you're going to allow flexibility you have to allow some flexibility to allow for the variances between what musicians you have available to you. And the church has also deemed it appropriate to allow variability on things like hymn selection. You know, whoever the music director gets to pick which hymns we're going to do, because under the pastor's authority, because local musicians don't all know the same songs. Even if you wanted to, write out a lot of, say, a whole year's worth. Let's suppose we have scripture reading cycles, A, B, and C. Suppose you wrote equivalent hymn cycles. So every church is going to play this hymn on this day of this cycle of the liturgical year. Well, it would be massive, and the musicians would throw a fit, because they're not going to all know the same hymns, and they're not going to want to be micromanaged in that way, because musicians are artistic types. Duh. I mean, watch Amadeus or something. These guys are historically have always been cantankerous. It's like, I want to do my creative vision. And so the church has always been willing to work with that to one degree or another. And that means that there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility built into liturgical law regarding what music is used. And now there is more flexibility than there has been in the past. And you can think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a reality. And so you may or may not like it. I may or may not like it. But right now, the law is vague on exactly what's allowed. And I can't accuse someone, as much as I might like to, of committing a liturgical abuse in the sense of you're breaking liturgical law. I can say, I think you're dishonoring the liturgy. I could say, I think you're doing something that's really unhelpful for people, that's not going to be conducive to their spiritual growth. But even in making those judgments, I should be careful, because Jesus kind of is down on that judging other people thing. And I need to realize that my own tastes and what helps me feel closer to God is not what helps everybody feel closer to God.
If we take this out of the musical realm, and what can one accuse a priest of should he skate up to the altar on a skateboard? I presume that there's no injunction against that.
Yeah, that's kind of a please don't eat the daisies situation. And that's a famous...
I don't know what that means.
Oh, okay. So back in, I believe, the 60s, there was a humor author. I don't recall if it was Irma Bombeck, but there was a lady author who was known as a humorist, and she was having a dinner party, and she gave her children meticulous instructions on what they should not do at the dinner party, because she didn't want them misbehaving in front of her guests. So it was like, don't yell, don't run, don't do all these things. She neglected to tell them, please do not eat the daisies that I have set in the flower holders on the tables.
Yeah. So
that was an example of something that was beyond what the legislator could imagine. And so there was no law against it. So when you have a priest riding a hoverboard up to the altar, I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to be hip and relevant and engaging, and those are good things. But there's no way the legislator could have envisioned someone doing that. And so technically there's no law against it. Now, in this guy's case, he got severely punished. I don't know that this was like a guy in the Philippines who did this.
Oh, I didn't know that this was an actual thing. I was just coming
It was a couple 3 years ago. This priest in the Philippines rode one of those hoverboards up the central aisle to the altar, got severely punished for it. I don't know that I can't really judge that because it's a different culture. I don't know the dynamics of Filipino church psychology, but this was deemed really inappropriate. I would have just, if I was his bishop, I would have just told him, knock it off, don't do that again. Because I understand the desire to be hip and engaging, and capturing people's attention is part of helping them to think about and engage with their faith. If they're ignoring you, then they're not going to do those things. So it is important to be engaging, but I don't think this is a constructive way of doing it.
If you like that clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.